Hello friends and fellow seekers of the good, true, beautiful. It's Mike here and welcome to Identity Matters. So today I want to talk about a principle that is so transformative. It will change everything about your life. And it's one of the first things we focus on in coaching work. And yet I find that it is one of the rarest things that people actually understand about the nature of life or understand about their own thriving and what's essential to their own thriving in their life. And so to get us into it, I want to talk for a moment about nature. And in particular, I just want to use the example of an eagle. So eagles are some of my favorite creatures in the wild. I'm particularly fond of the golden eagle, although all eagles are awesome. And when you think about an eagle, there is a particular, they're magnificent creatures, like their wingspan, their power, their eyesight, their claws, everything about them is regal and elegant and powerful and effective. They're just made for a certain kind of glory, the way that they function in the world. But they're also made for a particular kind of habitat. Like I think about earlier last year, actually, I spent some time up in the Pacific Northwest, and where I was staying, there were both bald eagles and golden eagles that would frequent the airspace above me. And it was just amazing to watch them as they would catch the thermals that would come daily around 11 or 12 o'clock in the day, and they would just rise elegantly and effortlessly up into the high altitude. And they would soar around the trees during the evening, and their call was just so piercing through the sky. And they seemed to be so much at ease with themselves, at ease with their environments, very much in their element. But if I were to take one of those magnificent eagles and I were to capture it and carry it to, let's say, the swamps of southern Louisiana, and I were to put a canopy over the trees so that it could not could not take to the heights, it could not fly, and it had to somehow traverse through the swampy understory of the woods there, so through the mud and through the muck and over the roots that were there, and it had to eke out a living in that way, it might be able to survive. It's still a powerful creature, it's still able to hunt, it's still able to do what it needs to do, but by all accounts it would not thrive. It would never thrive in that context. And the reason it wouldn't thrive has nothing to do with its nature. It has nothing to do with its inherent value as an eagle. It has everything to do, though, with its context. Like it's not meant to be in a swamp. It's not made for it. And so if you take an eagle and you put it in that context, it's not going to do very well. And so one of the things about the principle I want to talk about today, which is the principle in coaching we call values, is finding your values, or finding the things that make you thrive in life, is about finding, in a way, your ideal habitat. And that's not the only thing it is, but it's one of the things that is important about values. Another thing that's important is if I were to take that same eagle and I were to put it in a context where there were no thermals, where it could not take its own pace through life, like it had to race with the wildebeests in Africa, or it had to run with cheetahs on the African savannah. It had to do something that was not intrinsic to its own nature. Again, it would not thrive, even though it itself was not at fault. It would just simply be in a context or in a way of engaging life that was outside of its design, right? So in order for that eagle to be thriving in its eagleness, it needs to have a certain context in which it lives, and it needs to be able to engage that context in a certain way in order for it to truly be the fullness of what it's meant to be. all that I just described there is what we in coaching call values. Now, normally in most cultures, when we think about values, we're thinking about things in terms of right, wrong. We're talking about moral qualities, like what are the principles, the moral principles that we want to live by, the things that are important to us, along those lines. That's great. That's a wonderful way to look at values, but that is not what I'm talking about here. You might draw the distinction as cultural values tend to be about right, wrong, and coaching values tend to be about alive versus dead, or thriving versus suffering. And what values do for each of us when we name them is they begin to identify in very specific, actionable ways the elements of our environment and the ways of engaging life that cause us to maximize our aliveness in the world. There are ways of engaging life, there are ways of being and doing, and there are contexts in which we need to be in order for us to be the fullness of who we're meant to be, in order for us to maximize our potential in the world, in order for us to be the full usness of who we are. And so one of the classic ways you might think about this is corporate cubicle life. I mean, you often hear people talk about the death by cubicle, when you get into the corporate world, or at least this used to be the case much more even now because we have so many people that work off site. But if you're in a cubicle and that's not a context where you thrive, and honestly for some people it is a context where they thrive, but for some it is not. It's like a little cage, and you put them in that context where they're in this little box, and you'll see, or they'll experience their life as shrinking, as shriveling up. Their creativity goes down, their productivity goes down, their will to be there disappears. They white knuckle their way through the day. And it has, and many times they'll end up trying to blame themselves, or the corporation will try to blame them for not being able to sort of handle the work. But that's like telling an eagle that the eagle is at fault for not thriving in a swamp. And that's not accurate. That's not actually the truth of what's going on. What's going on is you've taken an eagle out of its ideal habitat and you've put it in a context where it cannot thrive. You've set it up to lose. So values are a way of naming so that they become visible, these contexts, these ways of engaging life that allow us as individuals to come fully alive, to thrive in the work we're doing, whatever that work is, to be fully expressed in our humanity, in our capacities, in our intellect, in our emotional intelligence, in our spiritual depth. Everything that makes us who we are gets to fire on all cylinders. And the truth of the matter is that the more minutes a day that you can spend in that ideal context, both by way of engaging and in your ideal habitat, the more you'll be able to be a productive member of society, the more good you'll be able to do in the world, the more capacity you'll have to accomplish your goals, the more staying power you'll have when things get rough, the more resilience you'll have to be able to bounce back when things go badly. Everything about your life in terms of its not just survivability but thrivability go way up when you understand what your values are and you begin to choose the radical act of living by your values, of actually building your life not by some other kind of metric, but in terms of I want to inhabit a world where I get to live out of my values. The reason this is radical is because it is so counter to most of the metrics that society tells us to live by, especially when it comes to our money-making Western world, where it's about climbing some ladder, it's about some kind of social status, climbing some social status ladder. It's about what other people think of you. And it's about those kind of status markers that other people or society or the community is putting upon you that you need to achieve. Whether that's the kind of house you have, the kind of car you drive, the kind of clothes you wear, the way your body looks, the title you have on your desk or your door, the amount of money you make, the kinds of vacations you go on, you go down the list, of whatever those kind of status markers are. None of those things actually have anything to do directly with values. They have to do with societal status. They have to do with all kinds of other measures. And most people, not surprisingly, do live their lives according to those metrics, because those metrics are the ones that are placed upon us as we grow up, and they're the ones that feel most urgent. But all the while, there is some part of us that is always longing to live out of a different place. And it's that place where we feel most alive. It's the sipping the margarita at sunset on the beach somewhere far away. It's the moment with your kids over the holidays where you just sit by the fire and you're enjoying time with them. Or it's the ski slope, or it's the going out for a hunt, or it's whatever it happens to be, those moments or those experiences in your life where you breathe a sigh of relief and quiet joy and say, this is it. Or you yell at the top of your lungs just from ecstasy over the joy of what you're experiencing in that moment. All of those things point to a value that you have touched on or you have stepped into. So let me tell you about how you find your values and then how you live by them. This process, by the way, is ongoing. Values are emergent, they're shifting. There are some that are kind of constant through our lives, and there are others that shift and change over time as we develop and grow. So I'll begin by telling you about a value that I have, and I'll even explain along the way why it's named what it is and things like that. But I have a value called Into the Wild. And I discovered this value years ago when I was hiking on a backcountry trail in southwestern Colorado. I was in a wilderness area, and I was on a trail high in the high country where I'd never been. There was storms in the area, but the sun was shining where I was. I was with some friends at the time who had also never been on the trail, and we were hiking along this gorgeous stretch where it's called the Needles, where you could see these peaks that were coming up over the horizon that you can't see any other way. Like, you can't see it from any street, you can't see it from any road, you have to hike there to see it. And so I'm there, I'm looking at this beauty. I know it's kind of dangerous, like, because there's storms in the area. I don't know what's around the corner, and it's hard. Like, there's something about it that's difficult, but it also is deeply rewarding. And I remember at the time just noticing how completely alive I felt in my body, how every one of the fibers of my being was just firing on all cylinders, and how I just felt this kind of bursting ecstasy of just, wow, I'm alive in this place, in this moment. And I made a point of remembering, like, what is it that's happening right now that's causing me to feel this? And I realized it was just a couple of things. It was the fact that I was on a trail that I'd never been on before, and there was this aspect of discovery in it. The fact that I didn't know what was around the corner. The fact that there was beauty and danger that were both present in it. The fact that there was some intimacy there, that I was with some other people that I was sharing that experience with. And all of that became an understanding of a way of engaging life, a way of being in the world that was part of my, let's just call it my eagle nature. That's a thermal to me. That's something that if I can be in that context, the more I can be in that context, the more alive I am. The more alive I am, the more productive, the more creative, the more resilient, the more all the good things happen out of that. That's just one value. So that value is called Into the Wild. Now here's the cool thing, one of the many cool things about values. Once you find a value like that one, values are completely transferable to every arena of life. They're not about a thing you're doing, they're about the thing that you're accessing through the thing you're doing. So So for me then, any context where I'm on a trail that I've never been on before, where I don't know what's around the corner, where there's a kind of a mix of beauty and danger, and where I'm with some other people, that context is what actually brings me fully alive. So one of those contexts for me is actually coaching, because when I am with a client, they are like a trail in the wilderness. Like getting to know them and walking with them through their life is like being on a trail I've never been on before. And there's beauty everywhere, and there's a little bit of danger because we're going over all these edges. And obviously there's intimacy because I'm walking with them through that process. And I am fully alive in that place. And I know that when I'm in that space, that's the best use of me. Like if you put me in those contexts, I'm the right guy for that because I'm wired for that. I'm the eagle on the thermal in those moments, and it's what I'm meant for. And that's just one value. So most people you might have 20 or 30 values that you can name once you start getting curious about this. There's usually about 5 to 8 that I would call core or uber or essential values, and these are the values like that one that are they're so intrinsic to our need, to our nature, that if they're not present, we immediately begin to shrivel up. We immediately begin to kind of starve. When you get out of your core values, it's like you can't breathe. It's you lose oxygen. And we all know what that feels like when you're taken out of an environment where you have any freedom at all and you feel boxed in and you feel like you're just gasping for air. That's a sign that you are out of the core foundational values that you are wired to be in. So the first step is just to get clear on what your values are. And just like I explained, the one way to do that that's probably the best of all, well, hire me. I can walk you through how to find your values in a matter of a few hours. But if you're doing it in your own life, then the way to do it is to simply start to be very curious about monitoring your own level of aliveness. And so aliveness is simply that kind of, it's a soft measure of when you feel that sense of, man, everything about me right now just feels very present, alive, excited, or activated, and in this moment, and then getting curious about what is present right now that's allowing me to feel that way, that's kind of opening that up for me, and really becoming particular about that. What is it that's going on in the way I'm engaging right now, or in what's happening in this context that's creating that for me? And naming what that is, and then based on what you naming the value. So it's a process, as you can tell, and it's not a process that happens from here, it's a process that happens from here. It's a heart-based process of discovery, because what you're looking for is not head aliveness so much as heart aliveness. So your heart is the thing that's going to discern how alive you are or not alive in certain contexts. And it's also your heart that's going to be needed to name those values. Now, my value called Into the Wild is a great example of this. Your values are unique to you. The names of them need to be unique to you as well. And they also need to have a certain kind of power to them. So when I say the words Into the Wild, it immediately takes me back to that trail. I'm immediately viscerally connected, not just to the memory, but to the experience of being on that trail. As you just saw, I just went back there with you. And that's important, because you need to have a kind of touchstone with your value names that actually connect you back to the value. So example would be like if you're having a game night, let's say with your family after dinner one night, and you're all sitting around a table or on the floor and you're playing some game, and you have this, and you notice there's a kind of aliveness happening for you in that moment, and you say, well, it's family time. So family time is my value. No, it's not. Family time is the activity you're doing. There's something happening in the midst of your family time that is the value. And it has something to do with the spiritual connection, the relational connection, the flow of intimacy. It could be the laughter. You've got to get down below the activity and say, what's happening underneath this that is actually feeding my soul? And you can always know you're not there yet when you're still saying something that's activity specific. Your value is not downhill skiing. It's something that's happening while you're downhill skiing. You know, it's the activity is the portal to something, but it isn't the value itself. So you got to get to that. And then once you get to it, you got to think through or feel through, what's the name that will capture the essence of that value for me? So I'll always just know what it is. I have a value that's sort of like that, maybe in the same ballpark as that game night, called Hot Molten Love. And so you can tell even by the name of that value that there's a feeling to that. Like, there's Hot Molten Love is this, it's rich, it's a thing, you know. It's not just, I'm not just labeling something. I'm connected to something when I say that is meaningful for me. So your names need to have that kind of visceral connection. And you continue to do this. Just don't take your time with it and continue to do it. Just be an observer of your own life. Notice when you're alive. Notice when things are activated for you, and begin to catalog and name what those values are. One point I need to make is that aliveness doesn't mean just highs. It can also mean lows. You can be just as alive in your sadness as you are in your joy. You can be just as alive in your grief as you are in your ecstasy. So when your heart is broken, when you are full of compassion for someone and it feels heavy, that may also be, but you're fully alive in it. Like, you are activated in that space. That too can be a value. So it's not about up or down, not high or low. It's about alive versus dead. About fully activated versus numb or just dead. So pay attention to when you feel fully activated, when all the pistons in your system are firing. That's what a value is. Once you have, let's say, 4, 6, 8 of these values named, then you begin to look through your life. Like, just, you can even map your days out, like do a time audit and look at 2 weeks of your life, let's say, and map out how you spend your time. And then use that as a graphic for going back through after you have 2 weeks of your time blocked out and say, here's how I'm literally spending the hours of my day. And go back through and attach values to it, like which values are present in my life and to what degree are they activated, like on a 1 to 10. Like, you might say, oh, I talked with my friend Judy, we had coffee last week, and this one value probably was at a 5. Like, we had a pretty good conversation and this value got activated, but it wasn't that intense, but it was okay, you know. Or I played pickleball with some friends and that was really fun, and this other value got activated in that. So you begin to map out where your values are already present and they're somewhat activated, or maybe they're super activated. And then the only thing you really need to do from there is to start looking for ways that you can turn the volume up on the places where your values are already there. For example, take your relationship with Judy deeper, or do something more fun than pickleball. Maybe something riskier if that's what the value calls for. And also how you can just look at a value and say, what's the thing I could try in my life over the next 2 weeks that would connect me to this value? And just begin to try those things. And the goal here is not to make some kind of radical shift overnight in the way you live, but to slowly begin to almost infect your life with values-based or values-founded activities, ways of being and engaging life. And what you will find is that as you do that, your level of resilience and fortitude and alertness and creativity all will go up. Because the more time, just like the eagle on the thermal, the more time you spend in your values, it's just like getting you out of the swamp and putting you up in the air, and you will have more of all the things you need in order to live your life well. And so the more you get it, the more you want it, and you'll start, hopefully, beginning to reorder your life more and more around spending more minutes of your day living in your values. What will naturally occur as you do that is that you will stop paying as much attention to these societal markers of what you should do or what you need to have or what kind of social status markers you need to be living by, because those things probably aren't that connected to the things that actually make you fully alive. From the inside looking out, it may not feel that radical initially, but from the outside looking in, it will look really radical. And we, within our culture, we write books about people who do this, you know, who kind of go their own way, and they march to the beat of their own drum, right? We think of it as a radical act, but really it's just this. It's people who have found the way that they're meant to be in the world, and they simply follow that path. Values are the way you get there. I did mention, though, if you are interested in getting there faster or getting there in a I suppose I'd say a more powerful way, at least a quicker way for sure, yeah, hit me up. I'd be interested in talking with you about coaching if you're interested in that. But you can do this work on your own. You just really have to take your time with it and really get curious about your life, following the directives that I've given you here in this video. So that's what I want to share with you today, and I look forward to hearing from you in the comments below, or you can email me to tell me what you're discovering about your values and how they're impacting or shifting the way that you live. So thanks very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next Identity Matters.